Letter 9. Danger of Delusions Explained. To Sister Marie Anne Thérèse de Rosan, 1731. On the same subject, the danger of delusion in the prayer of recollection. My dear sister, always listen to that great interior director, who alone can give light and strength to us in our necessities. Do not use books when he speaks interiorly. Let your main point be a holy repose in the divine presence. Never leave it. Do not break the sacred silence unless God gives you an attraction for some holy and useful colloquy, after which re-enter your fort and sanctuary, which is no other than recollection and interior silence in the presence and the sight of your beloved. In him alone, and in this simple and sweet repose in God, will you find all light, courage, strength, sweetness, patience, humility, resignation, peace, and rest for your soul. I wish you all this to the highest perfection. Do not be afraid of darkness and dryness in prayer. When one knows how to unite one's will to the holy will of God, accepting all that he wills, one is safe and has everything. This is, according to Saint Teresa, the most perfect prayer and the most perfect love. You did very wisely in explaining to the Reverend Father the subject about which you write to me. I have so much respect for his views that I should consider myself mistaken if mine were opposed to his. I have always thought with him that no one ought to meddle with the prayer of recollection unless he be called to it, and also that this grace cannot be merited by good works, nor can anyone succeed in it by any effort of his own. I have only added, with Father Suran and others, that one can, indirectly and beforehand, dispose oneself to receive this great gift of heaven by removing obstacles, first by a great purity of conscience, secondly by purity of heart, thirdly of spirit, and fourthly of intention, which will carry a soul very far on the road to it, and that having so far disposed oneself, one ought by short and frequent pauses, as if waiting to listen, give free course to the interior spirit. Will you read this to the Reverend Father, or send him this little paper if you are not able soon to see him to speak to? Tell him when you see him, I beg of you, that I consider him bound in conscience to disabuse in my name all those persons whom he considers to have been misled, and that I depend upon him in this matter, as I do not know whom it concerns. But in order to proceed with all due discretion and the prudence necessary, I beg him first to be good enough to consider these 2 points. First, that he ought to certify himself of the fact by gaining some knowledge of the interior state of the persons in question, because only to hear about it at second hand does not throw much light on a secret and altogether interior subject. But it may be said that these persons are known to be very imperfect, and have been seen to commit many faults at which others have taken scandal. My reply to this is the second point. Experience in direction teaches us that, beneath very imperfect appearances, God often hides great interior virtues known only to himself. Therefore I do not believe that these persons can be accused of being misled and mistaken in their manner of prayer, especially as it often happens that their faults and imperfections are grossly exaggerated by a want of charity or by still worse motives. I remember now what Saint Teresa said, speaking of herself, that this method of prayer was a subject of suspicion in her, and that what made it seem a mistake and delusion of the devil was that the most enlightened persons whom she consulted could not reconcile in their minds such a gift of prayer with her conduct at that time. That is to say, with her eagerness to go to the parlor, to know, to see, and to be seen, to chatter with relations and worldly acquaintance, thus losing a great deal of time and neglecting her soul. For she herself tells us that this was then her state. And this, she adds, is why all who knew me considered my prayer to be nothing but delusion. With regard to this, I have come across directors who have had experience about it, and they said that God sometimes gives this prayer, first, to great sinners at the beginning of their conversion, in order that this work of their conversion should be more speedily and completely effected. Second, to very imperfect souls, to enable them to correct their failings more easily and promptly. But what is added, and what I believe to be very true and correct, is that it is extremely rare to find this gift retained at the same time as faults and considerable imperfections, especially if these be habitual, frequent, and recognized, without any efforts being made to correct them. Letter 10. Delusions and Prayer. On the same subject. This is my reply about the person in question. It seems to me that her prayer of recollection is more from the mind than from the heart. It is the opposite of what it should be, for in order that prayer be fruitful, the heart should have a greater share in it than the intellect. In fact, it is entirely a prayer of love. The soul resting in God loves Him without the knowledge of that which it loves, nor how this love is produced in it. But the reality of it is manifested by a certain warmth it feels in the heart, by an irresistible attraction to this divine center, which it seeks without seeing distinctly what it pursues, and to which it yields, and from which nothing can distract it. From this arises the great facility of this prayer, which is a sweet rest for the heart, and continues without effort for as long as it is desired. Therefore, if the person of whom you speak experiences as a preliminary a great exertion of the mind, it is a sign that her recollection is not yet what it should be. The remedy for this seems to me to be, first, when carried away by this great recollection, to concentrate the attention on the movements and affections of the heart, as if to retain and enjoy this delightful repose. There is such a charm about this feeling of sweetness and joy that it engrosses the whole attention of the soul, which thus understands better what it loves, while the mind without effort, and almost without voluntary application, finds itself captivated by this feeling, which is, as it were, the food of the heart. Second, if, notwithstanding all efforts to the contrary, the intensity of thought continues, forbid this person to spend more than 2 hours at most in prayer, and during her reading, and at other times, tell her not to purposely try to get recollection, but only to give herself up to it when God impels her, remembering always to fix her attention interiorly on the affections of her heart, to enjoy in them at leisure this sweetness, delightful repose, and interior peace. Third, tell her always to employ a little time to examine how her prayer was made, at its beginning, in its progress, and at its conclusion. That is to say, firstly, what form did the recollection take? Secondly, if it produced in her distinct thoughts and feeling, or if this sweet sleep was too profound to enable her to remember anything. Thirdly, how she felt when this state ceased. For example, did it leave her in a state of great recollection, with a great desire to act rightly, to attach herself entirely to God, and to please her divine Master only? Let us be thoroughly persuaded that we can find God everywhere without the least effort, because He is truly present to those who seek Him with all their hearts, although they may not be always aware of His presence. Therefore, whenever you are no longer occupied with created things so that you have ceased to think any more about them, know that your soul is then occupied by God, and in God without your knowledge. And this is the reason. God, being that hidden and invisible object to which tend all the desires of a right heart, from the moment it turns its desires away from creatures, they then find their natural center, which is God, and by continually dwelling in this center, they gradually increase until they become very distinctly felt and produce strong outbursts of love. Therefore the true presence of God is, to speak plainly, but a kind of forgetfulness of creatures with an interior desire to find God. You thus perceive in what consists the divine interior and exterior silence, so precious, so desirable, and so advantageous. True earthly paradise, in which souls who love God already enjoy a foretaste of heavenly happiness.